Right. Okay. Welcome to the Kaizen Constant. We've got a small dynamic team to work on here, but obviously for those of you that are dialing in and catching it afterwards, this is just as a reminder, this is a way of you working with your team on a particular theme as to how you can grow your business. And as a reminder, the reason it's called the Kaizen Constant is just because you're looking for those constant small improvements, those little one percenters that are going to make in on their own, in isolation, they won't make a huge difference. But when you compound them all up, they actually make a huge difference. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. And we're going to be doing specifically the front stage focus, which we've done with you guys in the workshop before, but I think it's really useful to think about this from a team point of view. Bhavesh, it was probably before your time, so it would be before your time, so you won't have done this before, and obviously Claire and Fiona, you won't have done this together. But the front stage is really about thinking about how we can generate more impact, more referrals, higher retention. How do we wow people? How do we make our business more talkable? Because that's what makes it even more successful. And the best example, which funnily enough, Bhavesh and I were just talking about, that I can give you in terms of the front stage focus is Disney. And actually, Disney use this terminology, but they call it on stage and backstage as opposed to front stage. But I think the business needs to think about it as front stage and backstage. Front stage is everything that the client sees and the customer sees. So everything that they get, whether it's how you meet and greet them, whether it's things that you give them, whether it's documents you send them, anything like that is your front stage. And the more you can make a wow impact with that, the better. And you want to really kind of trying to think about this stuff in terms of how can you preempt your ideal client, the things that really matter to your clients. So if you go to the Disney park, which I think Bhavesh might be doing in Japan later on this year, then what Disney worked out was that they found that there was a magic number in terms of trash cans. Not only are the trash cans beautiful, you can see that they're not just like any other trash can, but they are actually beautiful. But they worked out that the average punter will walk 30 feet to put something in a trash can. If it's more than 30 feet, they just won't bother and they'll end up throwing it on the floor. So at no point in your Disney experience will you be ever further than 30 feet from a trash can, because they want that whole experience to look and feel fantastic the whole time. And that's what we're trying to do with our front stage. We're going to be thinking about the ideal client, but thinking about how we can really create magic, to use Disney's terminology. And when we're thinking about magic and Disney's terminology, we want to be thinking about, how can we create themes? Like Disney's brilliant at having like the different themes of each of the the zones or kingdoms, I think they're called, within Disney. And so if you can use your corporate theme to really spice things up when it comes to what your clients get, using terminology. So, for example, Disney refer to their employees not as employees, but as cast members. So if you are, even if you're, so Carol, who my wife, who was a director at Disney, she was referred to as a cast member. She didn't work in the parks. She worked in the head office, but they were still all cast members, and they knew exactly what it was to be a cast member within that. So how can you use your corporate theme to make the experience more powerful for your customers? And you can think about this from a client engagement point of view. And how can you really go to the extreme details? So when Carol first joined Disney, she was sent on what they called was their induction week, and that involved actually going to a Disney park and being trained to be one of the characters and then being in the park. She was Mary Poppins penguin. And she had to learn the signature. She had to learn how to, so you refer to children as prince or princess. You had to, the minutiae detail as to what they go into to make their front stage amazing. is incredible. And we can do this in our business because it really will wow the customers. And also, of course, what we want to do in our business is we want to under promise and over deliver. So when you're in the queue for Disney for the rides, what you'll often see is like the queue is 1 hour from here or 45 minutes from here. If you are stood by a queue sign that says that the ride it would take 45 minutes from here, almost always it will take more like 30 to 35 minutes. So you've got 45 minutes in your head that you're going to be queuing for um, the whatever the roller coaster is, I can't remember, the runaway train. But actually, even though you've got 45 minutes in your mind, it takes you more like 30 minutes. So they under promise, over deliver to manage people's expectations. And we can do the same in our business. We can surprise our clients and we can also tailor things specifically to them. So Disney tailor the height of the windows. So the bottom of the windows are much lower than you'd normally get on a high street because they know their ideal clients are children, and they want the children to be able to see in. So how can you really refine your front stage for your ideal clients? They also know that their streets are only going to be walked, not driven. So there are no 90-degree turns in Disneyland. I'm hoping Bhavesh is going to prove me right when he goes and it looks at Disney in a slightly different way by when he goes. But there's no 90-degree turns because it's actually just easier to walk around um, uh, more rounded corners. And then there's another story before I get you guys doing some work, which I think is amazing. So I saw a speaker at a conference in, I want to say it was Miami, and he did a 40-minute keynote talk. And the whole keynote talk was about the experience that his son, who had a really like a very unusual disease. I can't remember what it was called, but he had a very, very specific and strict diet. And on the first day, there was not very much that he could have for breakfast. But the chef came out and spoke to him and found out that his favorite breakfast was apple pancakes. She got all of the ingredients herself that evening, and the following morning they'd made apple pancakes for him, all based on his specific requirements. And this guy now has a career as a keynote speaker, and he's spreading that message. So if we make our business really talkable, then that's what people spread the word out on what we're doing. So I'm going to break this. I know, Claire, you have a client at 3 o'clock. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this Kaizen meeting down into 3 chunks. And I'm going to get you to work through this in stages. You may need longer than that, and you may need not as long as that, but I'm going to do it in such a way as you can basically go as fast as you'd like. But the way I want you to start is I want you to start by trying to think about the celebrity service that you would give. So I want you to think about, if George Clooney, I'm going to pick George Clooney, is your ideal client. He's wealthy, he's apparently good looking, he's the perfect client to many people. If he was to phone up and say, right, I'd like to come and find out more about your business. I'm thinking about getting into whatever it is that you do, and I would like to go through your process. I want you to think about, what would you do? What extra services would you provide? And maybe this just from a business point of view, if George Clooney was approaching your business with a view to becoming a client. And so what I want you to do is, because when you think about that, you go, well, God, if Johnny, right, so my ideal client would be Stephen Bartlett, probably. And if Stephen Bartlett knocked on the door of the trust team, said, right, I'm thinking about, I need some business coaching. I'd like to, find out more about the trusted team. What we would move heaven and earth. We would do a whole load of things differently for Stephen Bartlett than we're currently doing. So if we think about what would we do for our celebrity service, then we can start to identify new ways of delivering what we would do for all of our clients. So the starting point with the front stage focus, which is the tool we're going to work through today, is to identify who is your dream client. And doesn't need to be, somebody you're actually going to pitch, but it's the kind of the image and the person and what it sums up to be your ideal client. So pick somebody, because with that person in mind, what you want to be doing is thinking, well, okay, what could we do to make it amazing? And so I want you to start off this front stage focus by working through, well, and apologies for the typo in this tool. What are the front stage contact points? And I want you to think about what does the client see when they interact with you? So what are the physical points that you interact with them? So that's, if you're a physical business, that might be the car park, it might be reception, it might be your meeting room. What are the remote areas? And I actually haven't got, hang on, let me just pull up the whole thing, because I've not got it on this slide. Here we go. So I'd like you to start by just listing out all of these points. So you've got physical, you've then got digital ones. So let me give you some examples. Use the example one. So you've got digital. So we've got things like 3 Steps to Entrepreneurial Happiness, which is an evergreen workshop. We've got the Limitless Life workshop. We've got the Entrepreneurial Happiness scorecard. So these are the digital things that we're interacting with our client. Our process, so our welcome pack, our knowledge folder, our new client follow-up sequence. What gifts do we make to our clients? Whether that's the pens, the folders, the books, and what events do we do? So I want you to be thinking, and you can come up with other categories for this, but I want you to start by just identifying what are the key front stage aspects to your business. Now, if you've done the phenomenal process, you should make sure that each part of that phenomenal process is in here somewhere, because each one of those is a point of contact for the client. But it might be that you've got in here the welcome email you send, or the follow-up email you send, or the suitability letter, or the financial planning report, or whatever it is that you do for your clients that they get, or they experience, or they see. And I want to just start this process off by listing out, once you've found your ideal client or your dream client, then what I want you to do is just list as many of those as you can to start with. And only once you've done that, do I want you to start thinking about, if your dream client was to turn up, how would you do that bit differently? So for example, if Stephen Bartlett was coming to see us, visit the trusted team, would we put a reserved space in the car park? Absolutely, we would do. If it was raining, would I be sending somebody out there with an umbrella to meet and greet him? Absolutely. Would we be making sure that he'd got his favorite drink while he waited in reception? And what would we make sure he was looking at and picking up and reading while he waited in reception? And what was the vibe of reception while he was waiting? And then what would we do next when we wanted to bring him through to discuss the trusted team? That's what we want to be thinking about. So I'm going to give you until 1:30 to make a start on that. Now, you're not going to have done much by that point, because then I want to go back through a couple more principles, and then we'll carry on this process. So I'll give you until 1:30. I'll put you into breakout rooms, and then you make sure that you've got that dream client and the list. Welcome back. So don't panic if you haven't got many ideas down yet, because this is just the start of it. But hopefully you've at least got a list of the different things that the different ways that you impact the client through your front stage. So what I want to do now is just continue with that theme and share a couple more ideas to kind of help provoke your thinking on this front stage concept. So there's a guy called Blaise Pascal, who was a French mathematician and physicist, inventor, philosopher, and also a Catholic writer. And a translation of a statement that he made was something along the lines of, "I'm sorry I wrote you such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one." And I remember speaking to a client once when I sent him his financial plan, and we really prided ourselves with our financial plan. So this was a document that we sent out to the client after that first meeting, which basically gave them a plan as to what they should do. And he gave me this quote back, and he said, "It's a shame you didn't take longer to make it shorter." I was like, "Oh, it really got me thinking," because it does take time to make things shorter and simpler and more concise, particularly when we're the experts in our field. We almost have this kind of inherent desire to show how smart and experienced and qualified we are. And yet, actually, what the clients value most is simplicity and terminology that they can understand. So, there's two ways to think about this. What How could you simplify and make more impactful what you'd give the client on as part of your front stage? Whether that's a financial plan or a suitability letter or a document relating to their um, nutrition plan, whatever it is, how could you simplify that and make it better for the client and simpler for the client? But the second thing that you could think about here is that client gave me some really valuable feedback that day. And so, and we therefore went back to our plan and go, well, okay, how could we shorten it? How could we? What we actually did was we put a client summary at the start of the document. So if they wanted the simple high level view of it, they could just read that page and they knew everything that was in probably a 40-page plan. And if that's all they read, it was absolutely fine with us. But obviously, it was a good starting point for them as well. So, what feedback have you got from one of your clients that would allow you to improve your front stage for your clients? So, what feedback could you take on board and improve your process based on? Um, there's another principle here that you might want to consider when it's coming to your front stage, and that is the feedback from the clients that you actually really value the most. And so there's a couple of things or one thing you can do here that's really impactful, and that is to create a client advisory board. So we actually at Efficient Portfolio, on the odd occasion, we didn't do it often, and we didn't put it into a place in a structured way, but we would have a client advisory board and by basically invite them in for a really lovely lunch, or you could do it. I know another advisor that does it where he takes them out for a really lovely lunch, and then he essentially would just ask them, what are we doing that we should stop? What are we not doing that we should start? And what do we really value in terms of what we are doing? And just giving those best, and you pick your best clients to be on that. So how could you ask your best clients really what it is that they value of what you do, what it is you should stop doing, what it is you should start doing that you're not doing? And I think that's a really powerful thing to do. And I think the people that I know that have done that, which also include Daniel Priestley, the phenomenal entrepreneur and author of things like Key Person of Influence, that people like that have client advisory boards, and actually Daniel has an AI advisory board in that sense as well. Um, and the last piece before I get you back doing some more work again is a reminder of a story about Elliot's magic ticket. Now, I've shared this with the trusted team before now, but I haven't shared it with um, in the Kaizen meetings. So I'll just tell you the short version of it. So Elliot's Magic Ticket is a story that's told by Jeff Rahm. So Jeff tells this brilliant story, and the best thing to do is to go and put Elliot's Magic Ticket into YouTube and watch him tell the story. But long story short, he was taking his young son on a train ride, and his son wanted to go on a big train. That was really the only requirement. Didn't care where he went; he just wanted to go on a big train. And as they went to buy the tickets, the lady said, "Right, so Jeff, this I need to, this is how much you need to pay." But Elliot goes for free because he's only young. And she'd heard them talk about how they were going on a big train, and she said, "Well, actually." you still need a ticket, Elliot. So even though he didn't get a ticket because he was young, she wrote Elliot's magic ticket on a blank ticket and she gave it to Elliot, and he went off and had his train ride. And Jeff Rahm just tells this story beautifully because this lady didn't have to do that, but it absolutely made Elliot's day. And as a result, his dad has been telling this story for some time since. So let's go back to the front stage focus and think, well, how could we really make it way better than it currently is? And I want you to carry on going through now that you've documented a list of all of the different ways that you create a front stage impact with your client. I want you to go through and continue that process and think, well, okay, how would we change that process if our dream client were to walk through the door? And really try and refine down some ideas as to what would you do to really create amazing impact with that dream client. So I'm going to put you in your rooms again, and then we've got one more sort of snippet of content to get you thinking some more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you to come back in at 10 to. We'll finish that off, and then I'll give you some more time to work through this with some final questions. I'm just going to finish off with a couple of bits and then we'll finish off this front stage focus. So one of the things that we want to be thinking about is how we really kind of stand out in front of our ideal clients, not just any client, but we stand out in front of our ideal clients and how we really wow them. And one of the examples that gets referred to a few times when I'm at coaching sessions in the US is Buc-ee's. I'd never heard of Buc-ee's before. Buc-ee's is a service station. So in theory, you'd go there and get your fuel, except their logo is party, or their kind of tagline is party like a rock star. So this is a service station or garage, but no lorries are allowed. And kids are asking their parents to go to Buc-ee's for the day. I don't care whether they're buying petrol or not. They've created such an awesome experience. And they know their audience. So that's why they're saying, no, we don't want lorry drivers here. We're not that service station. We're the service station for the families and the kids. And so they've really kind of gone to town on that approach. And I think another thing that you want to be thinking about is how can you really wow your clients? There's a book called The Fred Factor. And it talks about how we can just be amazing and just offer way more than what our customers expect. And the example I always use in this is a guy who runs a business called Ron Grant Removals based around Oakham. And this is the only image I could find. You'll see it's got truck images on the middle because he doesn't have a website. He doesn't have, like, literally there is nothing. And yet every time I've used these guys to move house, they've done the most amazing job that I can't help but go off and recommend them to anyone that's moving house. And we've actually moved removal dates so that we could use Ron Grant because he's done such a good job. And it's essentially, he just massively over delivers on, and I every time I'm left going, and he only charged that much to do that. So we've got to be thinking about how can we do that? Because if we do it, he builds his whole business based on that principle. And I'm really glad that Kenny's on this particular session because I know he's a massive advocate of this principle, and that is the handwritten letter. The handwritten letter goes a very long way. And I know that Kenny does it because I've been the benefactor of one of his handwritten notes and a book called the Golfer's Mind when I first met him 15, 17 years ago or whatever it was. But an example of this is a guy called Alexander Rinker. He launched Selinus, which is, it's a software company. It's not particularly interesting, but it's now valued at over $1 billion. And he grew that business exclusively by writing and sending handwritten letters to his ideal clients. It is an incredibly powerful principle. And when was the last time that you sent a handwritten letter to one of your clients or one of your ideal clients, one of your potential clients? It really is a phenomenally powerful thing, and even more so I suspect now, than when you did it and sent me that letter, Kenny, 17 years ago. It's even less likely to be received now. So a few of the things that I want you to be just thinking about when you're thinking about your front stage, a few ideas that we implemented when in my previous business, Efficient Portfolio, that may or may not be helpful. So obviously, the first thing the client sees when they come to meet you is your car park. So we, as a client, we would put a name reserved space for clients on the visitor space. So we would have, Ken and Maureen are reserved for Ken and Maureen on their space, because you want them to, the minute they drive in the car park, you want them to go, wow, that makes me feel really special. Our receptionist, when we were at our previous office and we could see people arriving, which we struggle to do now, but when we could see people arriving, I think it was raining, our receptionist was instructed to go out and meet them with an umbrella. We had a coffee menu. Now, this was before the hub and spoke. We used to have a coffee and tea menu for our reception while they were, when they first came into Efficient Portfolio, but also in their client profile, we'd make a note of what they ordered so that the second time they came back, you could really wow them by going, do you want a latte again? It never see. I was literally just down having lunch in the hub and spoke earlier, and someone was blown away because Will could remember the tweaks to the sandwich that he wanted. It's really powerful doing that. But you can also do this, that might not be, you might have a digital or a remote business. So how can you do that on the phone? How can you answer the phone or have the person that answers the phone welcoming the person, like it never ceases to amaze me how many people are amazed when you pick up the phone. Hi, Claire. Now it's expected on a mobile phone, but not on a landline. But the technology's there to do that. What can you be gifting them when they first come to meet you? We used to give them a copy of one of our books. We'd always give them give them one of our pens as a gift in their welcome pack. So when you're meeting the client for the first time, we also had a really lovely hard card folder that we'd give them all of the things, like all of the terms of business and our client brochure. And just as a thing for you, Bhavesh, yes, we always gave them the terms of business, but we gave them a far more impactful client brochure, which I'm sure I could get Charlotte to send you if that's of interest.
Yeah.
Because yeah, they want the term, they expect the terms of business. Everyone gives them a terms of business. No one wants to read the terms of business, but give them a really beautiful folder that brochure that shows, guides them through how you work. Has anyone ever thrown away a box that one of their Apple products came in? I can't bring I've got a stack of boxes in the loft because they're too beautiful to throw away. How can you present? That's their first front stage. When you buy a product from Apple, that's the first step of their front stage. We used to actually, so when we sent the clients the Efficient Financial Plan, we got some hard white boxes, all embossed with Efficient Portfolio done, A4 boxes. And so and you get clients going, wow, this is, they've paid £2,000 to £3,000 for this plan, and they're expecting something that's impactful from a mental point of view, but they're not expecting it to visually be beautiful. So it turned up in that box. It was hardbound like a book, and it blew people away, and that instills in them confidence, and they're much more likely to become clients. We'd also, when they became a client, give them a leather-bound folder for them to put things like wills, trusts, important financial documents in. So what can you give them when they become a client that has them going, wow, that's a beautiful thing. I like that. And also, often nowadays, our front stage is emails and templates. So going back and reviewing every email and every template and every letter that you've got and making it even better, bringing in some more of those themes, like we talked about, make them more impactful, make them funny, make them memorable, rather than just making them compliant, and you will have a far more successful business.